Welcome to Brilliant. We've got somebody really fun for you this time. You're going to be using this book probably every week. You're going to be going back to it. And it's like, what did Rebecca say? What do I need to do? I've already done that. And our clients that we have are noticing the difference because our communication internally is starting to change. And for us, that's really important because Rebecca, I've always heard meetings suck. Oh man, another meeting. And it's not just us saying this, right? You've heard this everywhere. So, everyone, welcome Rebecca Hinds. Her book, Your Best Meeting Ever: 7 Principles for Designing Meetings That Get Things Done. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Tristan.
Well, okay, let's start off with meetings are broken by design. That's from your book
Mhm.
directly. What do you mean by that? Because I feel like my meetings are all broken.
Well, they're broken by design and they're broken by the lack of design. And I think that's at the core of the problem is we don't think carefully about how we design meetings. We throw them on our calendar wherever they'll fit. We default to the 30 to 60-minute cadences that are, or time lengths that our calendar tells us should be a meeting. And we're not intentional about thinking about this very important product within our organization that is highly, highly dysfunctional.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't, you know what it is? It's that most of the time when we show up to the meetings that, let's say I created the meeting, there's no, there's an agenda, but I feel like the agenda gets scattered and sometimes there's no agenda, right? So I'm like, hey guys, the meeting is in the book. So we're just showing up. How's everybody doing? And then nothing gets done. So when we're looking at executing a better meeting, where do we start with that?
So there are multiple different dimensions, and I think the agenda is a good example in the sense of there's actually no research to show that having an agenda improves meetings, and that's because it's not just about having the agenda, it's not just about doing the thing, and this holds for meetings as well. It's really about how we design them. And so when we think about meetings in particular, I often think about four key dimensions of our meetings: the length, the cadence, the attendees, and the agenda items. That's often a good place to start in terms of each of those dimensions. We should be thinking very intentionally about what is the length. It probably, if you look at your calendar and most of your meetings are 30 minutes or 60 minutes, it's probably a sign you haven't designed them intentionally, thinking about, okay, what is the right length for the purpose of the meeting? Agenda items are a great one as well. So often we throw them together as a laundry list of topics rather than using the agenda as a tool to get things done. And so one of my favorite strategies around the agenda in particular is every item should be a combination of a verb and a noun. Because what that does is the verb ensures that you know what specific action you're supposed to achieve in the meeting. So don't say, don't say team budget discussion. Be very clear about what are you doing? Are you deciding on the Q3 budget? Are you debating something? And that does a couple things, but one of the most important outputs of that is it's very clear when you've done the thing and you can move on and make for a more efficient, more effective meeting. We know that the earlier agenda items disproportionately take up more time. We know that if we have trivial topics on the agenda, they disproportionately take up more time as well. And so thinking about the agenda really intentionally is often a healthy way to reset some of our norms around this default meeting culture.
But that takes more time to do, right? That's what we're thinking. It's like,
Mhm.
why do I need to prepare for a meeting? But because you'll have an amazing meeting, that's why,
Well,
right?
yes. often we think about the short-term time savings rather than the long-term time savings, right? If you're throwing together a agenda, you're recycling. About my colleague Stephen Rogelberg has done great research on just how many agendas are recycled time and time again. We take the agenda from last week, plop it in this week, and yes, it might be more efficient. We might save the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes it would take to create a new intentional agenda, but we've then probably wasted the whole meeting for 6 7 people di- discussing things that probably shouldn't be, don't deserve to be in that live meeting time as well.
Got it. All right. You mentioned bad meetings are often symptoms of a broken communication system. So explain that to me because obviously I read the book. I know what it means, but as somebody listening through, it's like sometimes when you say broken communication system, when I first read it, I'm like, oh yeah, 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 it makes sense, right? You just had to, I had to verbalize it. I had to read it. Explain that to me.
And I think we all feel it in our organizations where we often blame meetings for everything that's wrong with work. Often they're a symptom of a bigger problem, and that is this broken communication system. And we saw this super clearly during the pandemic where we had more tools than ever before. We had more digital tools than ever before. What we didn't have was clarity in terms of how we use these tools. And we know that when employees don't know where the real work is happening, when work lives in 5 different places, they start to resort back to meetings, and in particular, inefficient, ineffective meetings, to search for information, to get everyone aligned, to do a lot of this communication that can, in theory, happen asynchronously, but can't unless we have clarity. And so, one of the first things I often work with organizations on when we're thinking about resetting the communication system and norms is create those clear guidelines. It can be as simple as what deserves to be a meeting in my organization, what should happen through Slack, what should happen through email, what should happen through Dropbox versus Google Drive, right? If employees don't have that clarity, again, they start to default more and more to meetings because they are the most reliable way to get information and hijack time.
You know, that that's important right there because I feel like you have two sides to this for the most part. And you tell me what you've seen out there when you've studied companies like Dropbox and Asana. I feel like there's a leadership group that says a meeting for everything. Oh, it's just meeting. Oh, you know what? Let's have a meeting. And then there's the other side, which is I hate meetings. Email it to me, text it to me, put it up on Slack, right? And I feel like there's nobody in the middle, right?
Right. And so often we have these, visceral reactions to meetings, and there's lots of evidence to suggest this is the case as well, where we're socially conditioned to one, believe that meetings are bad, and that's why when you can't reliably ask people how effective are your meetings, because we have this, I call it a meeting suck reflex. And at the same time, we overwhelmingly index on meetings, and that's why having these clear guidelines are so important as well, because if employees don't have something, or you yourself don't have something to refer back to in terms of, does this deserve a meeting, you're going to make excuses that this meeting does deserve to exist in a way that probably is going to be really harmful for other people in terms of wasting their time.
Yeah, I mean, when I was so first I saw the title of your book, right? Your best meeting ever. And I'm like, okay, I'm excited to read this because because all meetings suck. That's the first thing I thought. Okay.
Low
I'm on the
bar.
opposite side of this. I'm like, listen, that could have been that could have been a text, man. Like just
Hmm.
text it to me. I get it, right?
Hmm.
But after reading your book, I'm like, it's hard to swallow when you're reading through it and you realize, shit, it's like I'm the problem again. Like I get it. It's a lack of communication that's the problem. When you mention like, hey, if your meetings suck it means that there's a bigger problem. It's not the meeting, Tristan, it's not the meeting. And I loved that.
And so much of it is human nature in terms of we're hardwired to operate in tribes and like to see each other and talk face to face. We're hardwired to believe that visibility is value. And so when we see people in the conference room, when we see a packed calendar, it signals to us busyness and it signals to us importance. There's nothing that says you're important more than being double or triple booked for a meeting, right? And so a lot of this is human nature in the sense of we've gotten into this culture where meetings are a symbol of productivity. And so, regardless of anything getting done in the meeting that's meaningful, at least we've checked the box and had the meeting. And so, that's why some of these tips and tricks and strategies that have been around for years and decades, just having an agenda isn't going to improve our meeting. We need to be thinking more holistically, adopting that systems thinking view in terms of, okay, what is the purpose of the meeting and how do we protect against so many of these natural human biases that lead us to overschedule and use meetings for things that don't deserve to be used.
I like that purpose of the meeting. Purpose of the
Hmm.
meeting. All right. Where do we go from the purpose of the meeting to then deciding, do we even need a meeting? Like, how, because you mentioned you're talking to these companies and you're helping them decide meeting, email,
Hmm.
Slack, phone call. Like,
Yeah.
when you're doing this, what have you discovered is the main reason for a meeting, like purpose? Why should we have a meeting?
I recommend what I refer to as the 4D CEO test. So it's a two-part test to decide whether a meeting deserves to exist. So the first test is the 4D test. A meeting should only exist if the purpose is to decide, discuss, debate, or develop yourself or your team. Now, even if a meeting passes that first test, it should still pass the CEO test, which is the content should be either complex, right? There should be enough complexity, enough ambiguity, enough unknown unknowns where it is probably going to be more efficient to get together live in a meeting. E, emotionally intense. So if there's emotions involved, you're needing to persuade someone, you're delivering tough feedback or receiving tough feedback. It's no longer just about facts and information exchange, it's about feelings, being able to read body language, empathy, trust, very important. Or O, from Amazon, is it a one way door decision? Meaning, once you walk through the door, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to walk back the other way. And in those cases, we know that the cost of misalignment is too high not to get in that meeting for 15 minutes and make sure everyone's aligned. And so there are so many things that don't pass that 4D CEO test. The classic ones, status updates. Status updates are information exchange. They're not aimed at, usually, they're not aimed at deciding, discussing, debating, or developing. Boss briefings are another big one I see, the meeting so that the boss can collect updates from the team. That doesn't pass the test. Even something like brainstorming doesn't technically pass the 4D test. And the research is overwhelming in terms of when we brainstorm independently before the meeting, we generate not only more ideas, but better ideas because we get out of this situation of groupthink and trying to impress other people and trying to follow the powerful people in the room. Now, once we've brainstormed independently and we're now ready to discuss the ideas, debate the ideas, now we've passed the 4D test and we can schedule the meeting, but also thinking intentionally about, okay, let's look at our meetings now and what components of them don't pass the test. Let's move those to be asynchronously and then use the meeting for only the things that do pass this test.
Got it. So where do we start when we're going to take on running a meeting like you indicate in the book, right? Where do we start? Where's the simplest place we start? Because I think we've been running meetings in a terrible fashion for so long, right? And or we're not running we're not running any meetings because I don't like meetings, but um, they're important, especially when you outline them the way you did. Where do we start so that our teams and leadership can adopt it easily?
Hmm. So this is highly dependent on the organization and how willing they are to invest in this. In the best cases, and I've had the fortune of working with many organizations where they recognize how important this is. There's nothing more important that we can be doing as leaders, as organizations, than helping fix communication and collaboration as an activity that we spend 85 to 90% of our time on. There's nothing more important we can be doing. In those cases, I recommend the first step is a complete reset. I call it a meeting doomsday, where the entire organization or a function resets their calendar, deletes those recurring meetings for 48 hours, and then rebuilds
Wow.
from
Yeah.
scratch.
That's
And there's a
Armageddon.
lot of it's
You're
army,
hitting the
and that's what
you're hitting the nuke button. You're like,
well,
destroy.
and that's what I was first inspired by, the concept behind meeting doomsday at Dropbox, where they called their calendar cleanse our meeting get in. And it
So
was,
good.
the IT team coming in, flipping the switch and resetting the meetings. And it's fascinating, and we've studied time and time again how people rebuild their calendars, and they change their calendars in fundamentally different ways than if they were to just do a meeting audit where the meetings are already on their calendar. One of the biggest benefits of this is we know that so much of our meeting culture is dependent on what's sometimes called the social contract, right? When someone sends you a meeting invite, you feel obliged to accept it. And you feel like rejecting the meeting isn't just rejecting the meeting, it's rejecting the person behind the meeting. And so this meeting doomsday also gives you a built in excuse and permission to decline those meetings where you feel a sense of guilt or fear associated with canceling the meetings. And we actually see that most of the time savings before and after the doomsday, they don't come primarily from canceling meetings entirely. We see, about 30% of the time savings come from canceling meetings entirely. Most of the time savings actually comes from restructuring. So thinking about those four dimensions we spoke about, taking that 30-minute meeting and switching it to a 25-minute meeting or 15-minute meeting, those small time savings not only add up, but they have this very powerful way of communicating to the attendees of the meeting that you've intentionally designed the meeting. When someone sees you've scheduled a 20-minute meeting. I've seen organizations schedule 27-minute meetings. It's all aimed at demonstrating to the attendees. Sometimes it's called mental proof, right? The idea that you've invested time in designing the meeting to be worth other people's time. They're much more likely to show up willing to engage, willing to contribute, knowing that, they're reciprocating the effort you've put into designing the meeting.
I like that. Yeah, I've seen some of our meetings that are only 10 minutes.
Mm,
People are like, we get a lot of people showing up and they know it's done in 10 minutes, sometimes
mm-hmm,
11 minutes, but
mm-hmm.
it's done,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
they show up better for that, better attitude, more participation because they know it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
done fast. It's more impactful.
Yes.
Okay, tell me about, I forgot the name, but I know you have it in the book because you just mentioned it. When Dropbox had their nuke day for meetings,
Mm-hmm.
is that something that we should be doing yearly, every 2 years? How often should we be nuking our meetings?
So I recommend at least once a year. And we know right now in particular, so much is changing. I recommend often, every 6 months so that we're resetting the cadence and the intentionality. there are very few meetings that should remain unchanged month after month, month after month. If you have a pretty similar calendar to what you did have 6 months ago, I think that's a red flag in many ways. But it needs to be intentional. And what I've seen time and time again is these calendar resets are often done top down, and they work temporarily, but they are temporary. What we've done with meeting Doomsday in particular is give employees the permission and ownership to design their own meetings from scratch. So they do the deletion, they rebuild from scratch. We give them scripts, we give them a lot of guidance, but that is so important. It's sometimes called the IKEA effect. We know that people are much more likely to stick to um, meetings, and they're much more likely to value what they've built, whether it's an IKEA desk or a newly rebuilt calendar, when they've had a hand in building it. And so that's one of the biggest, pitfalls I see organizations fall into with these types of cleanses is it's something that exclusively happens top down. Often it blindsides employees. They often love it, but they're not committed to the changes in a way that Meeting Doomsday is aimed to really optimize for.
Okay. Do we have a meeting to destroy the meetings, or do we just destroy them?
So we definitely have alignment in terms of how are we going to initiate this doomsday as a team, as a department, as an organization. I think a lot of this can be done asynchronously, and I hope in the book I outline step by step how you should be thinking
Okay.
about doomsday and then initiating it. But if there is, decisions that need to be made, if there are debates in terms of, oh, do we do this with everyone versus a subset of our population, then perhaps a meeting before the doomsday is warranted.
Okay. I like that. And yeah, you do outline it great in the book. So, in regards to there being so many different companies, you've got startups, you've got
Mhm.
legacy companies, and you've got companies in the middle. Should a startup have, from what you've seen, have more meetings, less meetings than, let's say, a legacy one? What have you noticed?
It's mostly a function of complexity and interdependence than anything else. And because of that, typically you'll see enterprises have and need to have more meetings than startups, where, you know, also the more in person time we have, the more we're able to, you know, see people in the hallway and catch up, informally, the less we need to rely on meetings in particular. But the key dimension is complexity, because the more complex our operations are, the more likely we're going to need to, and that's again the C in the CEO test, the more we're likely going to need to rely on meetings to resolve that complexity. And when we need to make decisions, when we need to discuss things, when we need to debate things, the more different stakeholders and the more different variables we're going to need to account for in those synchronous meetings.
Okay. Decide, discuss, debate, develop. In the discuss one, what do we typically need to discuss at that level for us to be able to have a meeting? Is it any type of discussion? Just for clarity for the audience, what does that look like?
Sure. So again, it should pass the CEO test. So it should be something that's complex, emotionally intense, or a one-way door decision. So we talked about complexity. If we look at emotional intensity, discussing a performance review would be an example of this, because it's a highly emotionally charged conversation. In theory, you could be discussing that asynchronously, but it's not going to be as effective as showing up as a manager, delivering this hard, constructive feedback to your employee.
Got it. The one way door decision, like Bezos said, like you said, right?
So that would be, we're discussing a fundamental product pivot that's going to change every aspect of how our organization works and how we go to market, that would be an example where you want to have that meeting to ensure that you've resolved all the uncertainties and ambiguity, and you're willing to commit as an organization to move forward with this decision that's irreversible or very difficult to reverse.
And what have you seen as far as companies that have executed something like this at a high level? What have you seen change?
That intentionality, and in particular, it helps people lower down in the organization push back on bad meetings in a way that often feels very risky, and it can still feel very risky, and I think there are other strategies we should be putting in place as well. But it helps employees across all levels, but especially at the lower levels, say, hey, I don't think this meeting meets the 4D criteria. Or could you tell me why this meeting or how this meeting meets the 4D CEO test? It gives people a leverage point to deflect blame in a way that doesn't necessarily feel as threatening or fearful.
Got it. I mean, the thing that I saw after reading your book, it's like it's just going to save us time long term, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm always lacking time because I need to decide what's a priority. And if I've taken the
hmm
time to outline it like this and make it clear to the whole company, hey,
hmm
these are the reasons we have meetings. Now, that's why it makes sense what you just said. They can feel more comfortable saying, "Wait a second, that's not a reason for a meeting, Tristan." Right?
hmm And ideally, it gives people more tools to self-police themselves, as we know it's easy cognitively to schedule that meeting on the calendar. It's a couple clicks, but let's take a beat and decide, is this really worth the time investment? And this is a good tool, I think, to help to make that determination.
You know what I loved that you said we shouldn't have a meeting to just mastermind. Like, I get that all Tristan, do you have listen, I wanna pick your brain, Tristan, I'm like, "Wait a second, let's not decide, discuss, debate, and develop under complex emotional or one-way door decisions." Like,
No, and
I don't
it's
want anybody
I
to pick my brain.
I see it all the time, and it doesn't set anyone up for success, right? Especially
No.
these brainstorming meetings where you come together to brainstorm a topic. It's not clear what you're optimizing for. People haven't had time to think about it. You're pressured in the meeting. You're pressured to say something, anything. This is especially true in US cultures where I saw a great article recently around the attendance grade in primary school and high school, and how we are conditioned to believe that we need to speak in a meeting as well, and that can significantly bias brainstorm type meetings as well, and in the sense of we feel we need to participate before we might have fully fleshed ideas and concepts. But thinking about, again, what can happen asynchronously, and then what absolutely passes that 4D CEO test that should happen in a meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I remember reading, and I don't know where I read this or even heard it in a podcast, but the way that Amazon has meetings, anytime they brainstorm beforehand, write up a document, they all read the document, and then they show up with intention, right?
hmm
And I
And
thought that was
I love
I kept on
it's
remembering that as I was reading your book.
Yeah, and it's we're raising the stakes and raising the bar for what deserves that expensive meeting time in a way that's enormously healthy. And one of the hallmarks of organizations that do have healthy meeting cultures is they have very strong both asynchronous communication cultures and relatedly strong written communication cultures, where we know that so much thinking also happens through the process of writing. And this is something that Jeff Bezos at Amazon has emphasized time and time again. You can't show up to a meeting without thinking through in a memo form various points of the discussion or debate, you need to do that hard work up front to prepare to make the meeting most useful. And so that memo culture, written communication before the actual meeting helps us ensure that that synchronous expensive meeting time is well spent.
Yeah, I so after reading your book, I obviously I'm just testing all this out, right? But after reading your book, I have a lot of different meetings with software companies, tech companies, startups, and I tested out lightly, um, just being more structured in the meeting, right? At least in this way, more with more intent. The what was it? The verb and the noun too. And I was like, wait, damn. First of all, it was great. Uh, what I realized quickly is these people I'm meeting, because now I'm more aware of it and I'm like judging myself. I'm like, Tristan, you suck. But nobody knows how to have a meeting. I'm like, we don't know how to have meetings, Rebecca. We're all terrible at this shit.
And it's especially bad. It's dependent, but I find it's especially bad with those external meetings because you try to spend so much time in the meeting on all of this context that should be shared up front, right? You and the catching up, where did you go to high school? What did you do before this? All of that should either happen before or in a medium other than a meeting, right? If you do want to develop those relationships and there's a very important purpose, do that over dinner or do that in an outlet that is going to be much more effective at building those relationships rather than this expensive meeting time.
I agree with you. I honestly, I don't like the small talk in between them. Like, guys, there's a meeting, there's an agenda. I know we want to get
Hmm.
to know each other and feel the trust, feel the connection, but
Hmm.
this is not this is not the place to do it.
No.
How do you go about that? Because there are feelings that are going to be hurt.
People respect a very well run meeting. And I think that sets up a long term relationship. Absolutely. We should be spending, if it's someone we've never met before or, it's just after a holiday, we should be, spending a little bit of time up front to develop that relationship in the meeting time. But people will absolutely respect, hey, here's what we need to specifically accomplish in the meeting. Here's a well structured agenda, and hey, after the meeting, I would love to develop the relationship in this way at dinner, at a event where we also know that the research would suggest that those types of interactions outside the meeting are much more effective at developing relationships than if you're trying to squeeze it into a work forward conversation. And so it is conversation dependent, it is relationship dependent, but people love a well run meeting and they respect deeply the organizer that also respects their time.
You know what I noticed after going through and using some of what you write in your book, I noticed that the meetings I then started having, because it's very recent, so it's fresh in my mind. Um, the people or companies I was meeting with, they felt more confident in me. And it was so cool to see, by the way, Rebecca. I was like, that was easy. I just needed to do this. Oh, interesting. Because they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're hoping you do when they're meeting you.
Totally. And, I think there are two very powerful effects that tend to happen. One, and this is especially true for early career folks or folks new to an organization, if you can run a good meeting, the natural conclusion is, hey, you can probably run a good team, you can probably run a good function. Whereas the opposite is also true. If you can't run a good meeting, gosh, I don't really want you running a team or a function either. And it has, it's this very visible way to demonstrate leadership and intentionality and care. In a way that is going to become even more important as we inject more AI into our workforce, as well there's this reciprocity that happens, and especially with external meetings, where if you've shown up with a clear agenda, you've kept the meeting on track, you've left with clear, work moving forward and action items, the natural response is the next time the other person runs the meeting, they'll want to show up prepared as well, in a way that has this domino effect. The same is true for leaders and their direct reports. Their direct reports are watching how the leader runs the meeting, and if they're taking the meeting seriously, the direct report is going to do the same. If they're not, the direct report is going to take those bad habits and spread them, and as they grow into leaders, it creates this domino effect as well.
That's what's happening right now in the world. So there you go.
Mhm.
We all suck at meetings. That's why I loved your book. All right. If I'm looking at preparing for a
Mhm.
meeting, how do I prepare better for a meeting? What does that look like?
There are lots of ways. I mean, the agenda is one, the purpose, having a clear purpose, having a clear agenda with verb noun combinations, understanding who actually needs to be in the room, right? We know that people often have a fear of missing out. We often, especially in US cultures, we tend to over invite so that we feel inclusive, thinking about who are those people who absolutely need to be in the room. They're stakeholders, they're not spectators. No two people should have the same role. We should be keeping our attendee list lean as well. And then one of the most important things we can do is ensure that whatever information happens or is collected inside the meeting, it's also shared to the appropriate people. Often, what I find, and this goes back to the communication system breakdown, is you have a meeting that happened, not everyone needs to be in that meeting, but many more people need to be aware of what did happen in the meeting, what decisions were made. And so being clear about how are you sharing that information? How are you sharing the recording, the transcript, the resolutions, and making that transparent across your communication system is one of the most effective things you can do to reduce future meetings, because people can start to self-serve that information in a way that doesn't then require another meeting with one of the original attendees and then two additional attendees, and then you have all these domino meetings that happen with two of the three people and then two of those three people, and it spirals in a way that there's so much duplicative repetitive work that happens, and you have decisions being made in three different places when they only need to happen in one place.
That's it. Yeah, I agree. All right. What about you? When you are going to have a meeting, how do you prepare for it when you're going to lead it? What are the things you go through? Because I'm assuming you built this, you might have a template, like a little template that you go through, or maybe a checklist or some routine. What does that look like for you?
So for me, I think through those four dimensions, the length, the cadence, the attendees, and the agenda items. But I do a lot of prep work in terms of that asynchronous document. And often, in the role I'm in, it's getting ready to launch a piece of research or getting ready to launch a new initiative. And I do a ton of work up front, often asynchronously, making sure, anyone can refer back to the goals of the project. Anyone can understand, the timeline. All of those things don't need to happen in the meeting. what is what are the things that absolutely need to be discussed, need to be decided in that meeting, and everything else should be happening asynchronously. So I often fear a good meeting because I know that it's going to require, and it should require, so much upfront effort on my end to get ready for it.
See, I had that I had that exact same thought as I was reading. I'm like, okay, meetings will take a lot more to for on my part to show up better, right? At the beginning, because this is all new to me. And I think I'll get better at it. But the moment I started seeing the results, because it happens so quick, I have so many meetings in a day, Rebecca. It's nuts. And so I could use it fast. I'm like, okay, I'll prepare. And I quickly saw results and I was like, shit, I'm doing this all the time then. This is great. But then I found like, oh my gosh, how much time do I have to spend? So how much time are you spending in preparing for meetings?
It differs meeting to meeting for sure, but if I'm launching, a new piece of research, for example, or a new report kickoff, I'm spending several hours on the pre-read, making sure that everything's clear to folks. I'm inviting the right people in the room. As you get into a cadence, and if you do have weekly, check-ins with your team, they should still pass the 4D CEO test. But then it gets easier and you get into emotion and you figure out, okay, for this meeting, it's much more effective to have the attendees crowdsource the agenda as well. And so having that automated as well, an automated, email or Slack message, what are the things for you that pass the 4D CEO test? So, in the past, when I've had direct reports, multiple direct reports, having a mechanism for them to share, okay, what for them is really important to talk about in the one-on-one, what do we need to resolve in this meeting, you start to develop tips and tricks to automate and streamline. But what I quickly find is, whereas before I might have needed to have 5 weekly check-ins to launch a piece of research, you really only need to have the kickoff and then the post-mortem, because you've set it up so well and you have other ways of communicating through the life of the project.
Got it. Okay. Communication then. Yeah, so I got a lot from the book. One of those was it's not the meeting. Like, Tristan, it's not the meeting. There's something else broken, right? And it's usually communication. That was very apparent. And I was thinking, how do you communicate between there? Like, is it do you let's say you're all the way at the top, and then you can restructure how communication happens between important meetings that pass the test. Do you suggest that it's by email? Would you implement that? Slack, Messenger, however, what have you seen works best as far as communication before meetings?
So it does differ organization to organization, but it's important to think about, okay, what is the purpose of these different tools? And often, I think about, and I forget who I learned this from years ago, but think about communication, collaboration, and coordination in particular, those 3 C's, because they have very different ways that you enact them or should enact them in an organization. So if you just need to communicate with someone, often that can and should happen depending on how urgent or important it is through a technology like Slack. If you're needing to actually coordinate things, if you're needing to ensure everyone's on the same page, there are deadlines and dependencies, then you need some other platform besides email or Slack where everything gets lost. It's very unclear, what needs to happen by when. Then something like a work management platform. I worked at Asana for many years, a project management platform where it's very clear who's responsible for what by when
Like
is
Monday,
absolutely.
Asana, all those.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay.
And then you still need platforms to actually collaborate. So collaboration is different from coordination in that it requires very real time responses from people. In that case, often a meeting is that channel. If it passes the 4D CEO test, you need that rapid back and forth. But you also need tools like Figma, for example. You also need, tools like Canva or these really rapid, iteration platforms that are often team specific. But the most important step is outlining those. And, I've worked with organizations that have done this really well, where it's very clear what are the 6 communication tools and coordination tools and collaboration tools in our core company tech stack. What is the purpose of each one? And what are the norms associated with each one? It can be a simple table. It takes maybe an hour to put together, and it gives employees so much clarity in terms of what do I use these tools for and what are the norms around them? When do I send a direct message versus when do I tag the whole channel? What are the desired or expected response times? If I get a Slack email, am I expected to respond, or a Slack message, am I expected to respond in 10 minutes, or is it 24-hour? Those SLAs are also important as well. But it's a simple table, and it's one of the most, high impact things. As long as there is an item with meetings and what's the purpose of the meeting, it can be one of the most high leverage steps an organization takes to convey that clarity to employees.
I'm smiling because that's another communication problem, right?
Hmm.
The
It's
problem.
all
It's so crazy.
totally,
I
totally, and
I love that.
it's the system thinking is really important.
I like that. All right. Communication, let's say Slack. Uh, Coordinating, let's say for us Monday. Collaborating, where would that give me some options on collaborating that you've seen work?
Hmm. So Figma is a great one. FigJam now, in particular, if you're looking at more creative aspects as well, I think that's the most common one I see in terms of more creative. Google Docs is another one where you have multiple people in the doc seeing changes, editing in real time. That can be really effective. Some of these new PowerPoint um, next gen tools are really interesting as well, where you can collaborate collectively on a slide deck. But again, it should be clear, why would we use PowerPoint versus why would we use one of these new platforms? Especially the meeting platforms, organizations. I've worked in organizations where the same employee will use Zoom, WebEx, and Teams in a single day. Having clarity in terms of what is your de facto meeting platform, and recognizing that sometimes you're going to need to use other platforms for external reasons, but let's not be using Teams in one function of the organization and Zoom in another, because it just adds complexity and it makes it harder to align on that single source of truth.
Got it. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I've got Zoom and then I've got Google Meets, right? Google Meets is so damn easy because I just press the button and it connects it. I don't know why we haven't connected our Zoom to the Google piece, but yeah, I'm guilty. Listen, when I was reading, and I think everyone as they're reading your book will be like, "Oh yeah, I suck at that. I'm terrible at that." Oh man, like you're talking to all of us in this business world, and you've done such a great job of outlining how to show up better.
Well, thank you. And a lot of it is, it's not that we are out to have bad meetings. So much of it is human nature, where these are natural human responses to want short-term efficiency in a way that, it just doesn't occur to us how much this accumulates in terms of wasted time for other people.
You know what? It's an afterthought. I feel like
Hmm.
most meetings are an afterthought of
Hmm.
a reaction to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what
That's
you
exactly.
found?
Yes, they're both the knee jerk reaction in terms of how we schedule them, and an afterthought in terms of how we design them. I think that's the key difference. We schedule without a thought, and then once we've scheduled, we sort of say, "Oh shoot," or we're already in the meeting, why didn't I design this better? I should have done this differently. I should have set the meeting up for success in different ways. I think it's that dichotomy between the scheduling being so easy or perceivably so easy, and then the showing up, the design being, in the best cases, quite challenging.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Where are you coming in from?
I'm just south of San Francisco area in Palo Alto.
Oh, nice. I'm in Malibu, so not too far.
Okay.
Not too far.
Oh wow, yeah, it's
Nice.
great. It's
I like. I like it. Do you work there or are you just visiting?
I work right nearby in Palo Alto at Glean, so it's a bike ride most days, and I love that bike commute.
I love that. Super easy. So your book comes out soon. If people are listening to this, it's already out. Go pick it up on Amazon. Go pick it up at Barnes and Nobles. It's going to be everywhere. What are you excited about now that your book's, let's just say it's released? What's most exciting to you?
I hope and I'm expecting that, we'll see a lot of positive change in organizations because of this rethinking of the meeting culture. I'm excited for the success stories that are already coming in terms of, organizations using meetings more intentionally and not recognizing how broken they were and how good a good meeting can be. Ideally, there's a reason why I titled the book Your Best Meeting Ever as a positive promise, because there's nothing better than a great meeting for so many reasons. And we've all had, at least a couple great meetings where we know that to be the case. I'm excited for that. And I'm also excited and nervous for what AI is going to do for our meetings and in our meetings. The whole last chapter of the book is devoted to technology. And I think we both should be very excited about the potential, but also very nervous in terms of AI making our bad meetings even more dysfunctional if we're not
Yeah.
intentional about bringing it in the right ways.
They should have, so based on our inputs as humans, right? And we're
Hmm.
like, okay, this is our structure. This is for a meeting, right? It's met all the criteria to have a meeting. At the end, AI should grade your meeting and just send it to you. Be like, oh, you sucked. You did a terrible job.
Well, that's what I recommend. And, ideally, it's never for surveillance, it's never for policing behavior. But when people have that information, and often this is, you don't know that you've run a meeting where engagement is just in the dumpster among employees. You don't know that you've run a meeting where 70% of participants have multitasked through the whole
Yes,
meeting,
the
or
whole
that they're
time.
double booked and triple zoomed. I've seen everything. These insights that AI can help glean and surface are enormously valuable. And that's one of the most exciting parts. And we're starting to see evidence of that, of people showing up differently in positive ways for meetings, knowing that their behavior is being analyzed in a way that it never has been able to be analyzed before. It's extremely powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. And I think it'll be for the better. But I'm always optimistic about everything.
I
So
hope if we have these bots showing up, in our place to meetings, and we've all been in meetings now at this point where half the room is bots rather than humans, that's where,
yeah, like,
it can quickly go
yeah,
downhill.
I could see that. Well, thank you for doing this. This was great. I loved
Thank
it. Give
you.
me more structure. The one thing I did write down, at least for me personally, great meetings create clarity, and it helps us move faster. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I've loved the conversation and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for doing this.